I mean, what's the last 30 years been? But self-development, self-improvement, all the rest of it. I mean, there's some nobility to it, I suppose. But during that course of that self-improvement regime, just about everything's gotten worse. I just think the case is already made that this is not going to get it done. That the glaciers are simply not benefited by you getting your shit together.
Yeah, so you think it's like a selfishness thing? It's like we've been too self-absorbed, too self-entitled, too much about the self. Something to do with our identity being very limited and constricted.
Those things are all there, but like I'm not a fan of accusing people of anything. I mean, I haven't met most people, have I? So, so we make our educated guesses best we can, trying to work backwards from the evidence. The evidence is that during the same time period at which the inner child was a big industry, and now trauma is a big industry, and the interior landscape is the fascinating landscape. That's the place you go to when the exterior landscape starting to melt on you. So what does it sound like? It sounds to me like the great grief bypass pretending to be the answer. So sorrow is the order of the day here, not being okay. It's not a time for being okay. Can you imagine looking at kids in the year 2035? 2035. Okay, these kids I'm talking about are not born yet, but they're being born now. Can you imagine looking them in the eye and saying, well, here's what I did when the shit truly started to come down. I went back to the good old LSD just to see how that would work out. I took some mood alters and went, a few really cool trips. And I mean, and I'm 17, listening to this shit. What am I thinking? As the world around me is melting and this idiot, in his 50s or 60s is bragging about how much self-development. See what I'm saying? The question is, what will it sound like to the people who are not born yet? Not whether it's self-indulgent or not, just how will it play when you got to look your grandchildren in the eye? I think that's a fairly good measure, to be honest.
Yeah, so I am curious about some of the things you are saying, like let's like trauma, for example, right? So if I have some kind of trauma and I'm doing some kind of work to process my trauma, to heal my trauma, to not pass along my trauma to my little kids, why would that not be, how would that not be a contribution to changing the world or making something better or taking responsibility?
Yeah, the math of the question makes a lot of sense. But the math of the question is predicated on this, that all the world is the sum total of all the individuals that make it up. That's the calculation that you just relied upon to say what you said. So the automaticness goes like this. If I'm working on myself and I'm vaguely successful at it, the world's bound to benefit. I would say to you, what makes you think that translation's automatic? What makes you think that all the world is the sum total of the, excuse the language, the fuck-uppedness of the people that make it up? And if you reduce the fuck-uppedness, then the upside just automatically rises like cream. I mean, there's just no sign that that's how it goes. So there's a trauma industry now, right? Of course there is. It's big business, huge money to be had, and a lot of opportunity. It's going to sound harsh now. A lot of opportunity to set the world aside for the time being, because you were in harm's way at one point in your life, and you get a get out of jail card called trauma. Now, I'm not saying people use it that way. I'm saying one of the consequences of being absorbed at the level of your own trauma is the world tends to disappear. And if your assumption is that while the world disappears and you're working on yourself, the world will automatically and magically reappear once you've done that work. I mean, first of all, I don't think it works that way. And second of all, are we supposed to wait for you? I mean, we need all hands on deck here. So you're asking those of us who are not taking time out for the trauma thing to do what? Well, you are. Look, I know it sounds intolerant. Okay? What you're hearing from me is something like this. There's a degree of urgency that comes with the fact that the clock is ticking in every way you can imagine. Maybe it's just not the time for trauma. Okay? So then why is trauma such big news in a time that doesn't have the time for it? That we can't afford the time for it? Well, it doesn't surprise me at all that trauma is big news when you're already given up. You've already decided that the work's too vast, it's too late, it's too crazy, it's too, all that. And then you go to trauma to legitimize that sense of, hey, I'm out. It's not shocking. It's coincidental in the extreme.
Yeah. So I'm curious about what is it that translates, and how pragmatically, what does it look like to do the work that life is asking of us? Not you, not necessarily you, but life is asking for us to do the work. Like, what does that look like pragmatically for those that might be listening? Some of the younger generations, they're wondering, how can they take responsibility? What can they actually do that will translate?
Look, anybody who answers the question in terms you asked it shouldn't really be listened to, in my humble opinion. Here's why. This is not a matter of the program. Somebody's got the program. Let's get the program. Let's meet the new boss. And maybe he's not the same as the old boss. See what I'm saying? This is part of the old strategy, that you got to have a plan, and you got to feel assured about it, and you got to know you're on the winning side before you take up the work. Just tell me what it looks like first, so I'm not signing on the dotted line for some bogus enterprise. See where that's coming from? It's like you want to get paid before you do the work. I want to know what I'm supposed to be doing first. So you can tell where I'm headed with this answer. It's maybe a time like this, one of the early casualties is the clarity of a, quote, plan. Maybe that doesn't belong. Maybe the question is not, what should you be doing? Maybe the question is, what have you been doing? Because that's not hypothetical anymore, is it? That's a matter of the record. So if you visit that instead, what have you undertaken in the name of a better day? And what kind of better day do you think ensued from it? And is it possible you're off the mark? Is it possible that your definition of a better day comes from never having seen one? Yeah. So what if we assemble in the town square? As an understanding now, what if we assemble in the town square, not tens of millions of people, I don't know, 27 people who don't really know each other, who mysteriously got the same message at the same time and showed up, but they didn't know why. But they listened. And that, because they tried not listening, and they know how that worked out. So they listened. And they start saying, you got them. So what did you make of that? Well, I just came. Well, who's the boss? Well, maybe there's no boss in the old sense of the term. Maybe there's no guru. If we've learned anything, God help us, in the last 50 years about gurus in America, it's that, the gurus are not very good for America. And America's not very good for the gurus. They don't work together very well, right? Okay, so maybe that's not what we're talking about, charismatic leading types, God, you just had a president that had a lot of those qualities, So I think the question, although it's very understandable what you've asked me, but it's a question that's a dead end. Show me, don't tell me, show me. Well, wait a second. I don't have to earn your absolute trust, and that's not the game. I don't have to be that guy so that all your doubts are allayed and now you know who to follow. Maybe the time of following like that has been tried. So maybe I'm not talking about, falling behind. Maybe I'm talking about something like this. Let's begin with the poverties, shall we? Not begin with the promise of success. And that's why I said, what have you done? Because nobody has to guess about what they have done. They just have to be really candid with themselves. I learned this, by the way, not in any kind of social justice diatribe situation. I learned this in the death trade. I'm sitting beside people who are dying, who don't get a second chance, who don't get to turn the clock back, who don't get to click their heels 3 times and say there's no place like home. See? They're heading out, and they can't slow it down. So you know what's happening, right? The notion that it's too late for most of the things they were counting on is coming around. And some part of them is turning into an adult, really for the first time. Because too late is grown-up stuff. Yeah, you don't get to negotiate with too late. No, you only get certain time in with your kids when they're kids. You didn't do it, you're not going to do it when they're in their 20s, no matter what you think. Feel bad all you want. Talk about how busy you were all you want, but it's gone. Okay, well, there's a lot of things that are gone right now. So as I say in the show, you can tell the kids it's not too late if you want them to vote for you. But you can't tell them that if you respect them. So then how do you mobilize in a time that's too late for a lot of things? Well, that's why you called me, because you have a sense that maybe that's what I'm doing. But you're not wrong. So I'm answering the question that you're asking me by doing what I'm doing. I'm not saying anybody else should get a rock and roll band together and try to change the world with what they're saying from the stage. I'm not saying that's the best form to do it. But I'm saying I'm not a one-trick pony either. I've done a few things. I'll probably do a few more if I'm granted a little time, you know. But like I said at the outset, they say that by the time you hit your mid-60s, you're supposed to be done, right? And you're supposed to be lapping up the consequences of what you did. It's not working out for me. So now I'm answering the question again. What should I be doing given all this? Well, there's no should. I am doing it. I'm doing something. Right? I'm making these pleas. I'm trying to make these things lucid and available to people who are inclined to hear